All right, here we are. So other trig functions, and we already know about sine and cosine. Sine is equal to the opposite side of the triangle over the hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. And then tangent, we discussed briefly, but hopefully you remember from geometry as well, is the opposite over hypotenuse. And so those are the three we already are pretty familiar with, and we can use those in our unit circle here. That if we have a triangle, for example, right here, that we'll take our reference angle, and from there we'll start worrying about what's the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse, the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse, and that's where we're getting our x and y values over here, x and y. And with sine being the opposite over hypotenuse, that opposite, once we find that ratio, it's dealing with the opposite. That's our y value. And then the adjacent is our x value. Adjacent divided by hypotenuse gives us our cosine ratio, which is essentially our x value, because it's going to be how far off of the along the x-axis did we go. So now tangent is taking both of those values and dividing opposite divided by hypotenuse. And there's times, since the hypotenuse is always there, and it's generally we've considered it just to be 1, a radius of 1 going around, and though really it can be any value because we're setting up these ratios. If you think of our special right triangles, we have, well, let's sketch them out real quickly. We would have either a 45, 45, 90 right triangle. So if this is 45 degrees, this is 45 degrees. This could also be in radians, but if this is 1, these are going to be square root of 2 over 2 and square root of 2 over 2. However, we could also talk about that same right triangle, not with a radius of 1, but a radius of x, or a radius of r. And so this would be, actually typically you wouldn't have that one be x. Typically you'd have your legs be x, and this side over here be x root 2. But you could have this side be x and divide it. And now if we're doing sine, for example, here's our reference angle, sine would be the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse, and so those x's, x divided by x root 2, those x's give us 1. So x divided by x is 1, and they cancel each other out. You end up with 1 over root 2, which gives you, when you simplify it out, root 2 over 2. And that's kind of what has been going on with these so far. And so same idea, just now we're adding in a few new pieces. We're going to have now something called the cotangent. And what the cotangent here is the reciprocal of the tangent. So cotangent, which is written COT, is equal to the hypotenuse divided by the opposite side. Actually, not the hypotenuse. I miswrote that earlier. That should have been adjacent. I'm sorry for that. TOA, the opposite over adjacent. And then cotangent here will be adjacent over opposite. It's just the reciprocal. And that's the cotangent. All right. The reciprocal from sine is the cosecant. So CSC, the cosecant is going to be the divided by the opposite side, or as you see over here, the radius divided by the y value. This will give us the same thing, so because the y value here is our sine, that's our opposite side from the reference angle, divided by the hypotenuse here, which is the radius of our unit circle. So radius divided by y is going to be the same thing as hypotenuse divided by the opposite side. Those are equivalent. They're the same thing. And then lastly, we have the secant. Secant is the reciprocal of the cosine. So this is going to be the hypotenuse over the adjacent side, or the radius divided by the x value. Okay, and now as you go through these, something that may be helpful to kind of, typically tangent and cotangent isn't an issue to remember which one goes with which. But what I'd recommend for Sine, what's the reciprocal of sine? How do you know it's not secant? Instead, is that each pair of angles here has a co involved in it. Oops, sorry about that. Just a second while this opens and closes. Doobie. La la la. All right, there we go. So cosine, the opposite of that, we already have a co, and so the opposite of that is going to be the secant. And sine, well, it's, I said opposite a second ago, I meant the reciprocal. So the sine, the reciprocal of that is going to have a co, and that's the cosecant. So you do need to do a little bit of memorization just to get the names there, but something that can help you is that each pair has one co involved and one non-co. So I hope that helps.